Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jorvik, and ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everyone in between, the Avatar has returned. And as part of my rebranding for this channel, I wanted to start doing reviews for TV and movies. And I thought, what better way to begin than to begin with one of the most anticipated adaptations of the year, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, I grew up with the original series, and I still love it to this day. So I went into this with medium expectations. I mean, all the trailers looked really good, and although I have been fooled before, and even the casting looked great. And overall, the look of the show screamed Avatar. So, did it hold up? Let's talk about it. Now, I am not going to individually break down each episode for Easter eggs and references. That's what New Rockstars is for. But I wanted to kind of talk about the overall impressions I got from watching season one, and what I liked, disliked, the characters and their arcs, as well as some of the visuals of the show. I also will be talking about some spoilers when it comes to characters and their arcs. So be warned by that, but I'll let you know. Overall, I actually really liked this show. I thought the story was faithful and the look of the show felt like Avatar. Gordon Cormier, who played Aang, was delightful, as well as, I'm sorry, I might mispronounce some names. I apologize in advance, but Kia Watio, Tarbell, and Ian Owsley were great as Katara and Sokka, respectfully. And I felt like each of them brought their a new side to the characters that really wasn't present in the original, and even expanded upon some of their arcs that we wouldn't have seen until later seasons. Dallas James Liu and Paul Sing-Yong Lee as Zuko and Iroh, respectively, also had wonderful performances that showed more of the dynamic between Zuko and Iroh that we got a taste of in the latter season of the original show. And there was one scene in the Omashu arc between Zuko and Iroh that actually brought me to tears, and I hope other people see it that way. But I will talk about that later in the spoiler section of the video, but masterclass. Okay, so let's move into more of like the characters and like the arcs and plots and all that kind of stuff. So there were 4 arcs of the show. Each of them were 2 episodes, and I think it did a pretty great service to the overall story in a way that is digestible for new viewers who wouldn't be as familiar with the original source material like the fans would be. And they achieved this by combining 3 to 4 episodes into one, and to an extent, and it didn't feel forced in most cases. It felt like a natural transition from story beat to story beat, and they even actually brought plots from season 2 forward into this season, and I felt like it was because so they could free up space for season 2, and so it wasn't as crowded. And I think the biggest example of this was the episode the Cave of the Two Lovers from season 2. That was actually adapted in the Omashu arc in this season. And in that same arc, they introduced Jet and his Freedom Fighters and the Mechanists as well into this like 2 episode arc. And it's centered around like this terrorist conspiracy plot, which I thought worked out pretty well, actually. And I think overall these 2 episodes were probably my favorite of the season. Another thing I want to mention is that this show is brutal. I mean, I will be getting into minor spoilers, so if you want to go in blind, I advise you to just go watch and come back when you're ready. If not, carry on. So you see death, like people being burned alive, death, and their screams like echo, like in every scene that it's in where firebenders just kill people, and there is one scene in particular that featured Azula, who we will talk about in a moment, and how she like lures rebels into the Fire Nation palace, where they are burned alive by Ozai, while Azula just watches with glee. Like seriously, she just stands there and goes, crazy. One thing I also appreciate is that they show more people who are affected by the war, including Fire Nation citizens, which we didn't really see in the original series, and I like that. So we're going to continue on with more character spoilers, and I wanted to go back to the Kyoshi arc specifically, and that is, I think, episode 2 of the show. And I wanted to talk about the dynamics between Suki and Sokka. Now, there was a controversy about the show talking about about the show taking out Sokka's sexism arc, which made a lot of fans mad for some reason. And they did kind of take it out to an extent, but I think that they replaced it with a better arc that still moves Sokka's character forward. And this arc isn't sexism, but is incompetence, which I guess that could be part of the sexism, right? In the show, obviously, Sokka is left as the protector of the Southern Water Tribe. And so when Zuko shows up and is looking for Aang, Sokka fights Zuko. Pretty quick fight, though, because he is swiftly taken out and embarrassed in front of everyone. And then later, when he meets Suki and the other Kyoshi warriors, Sokka introduces himself as a warrior and a protector, and Suki takes him very seriously. I should preface this by saying that I loved Suki in this, and her actress, Mariah Zhang, I believe, portrayed her as this sheltered girl longing to experience the world and what it has to offer, and that's something that she sees in Sokka, who is another warrior. She also has this puppy dog curiosity, and is really extremely awkward when she's around Sokka, which naturally it's there's there's a great joke where she sneaks up on Sokka getting dressed and he's shirtless, and she just stares at him, and he's like, someone should put a bell on you, because she's just sneaky. And I don't know, it obviously I can't do the scene justice, but it is a pretty funny scene, and I like that. So when they finally have their little meet cute in the woods, they spar. So Suki fights with Sokka, but every single time Suki just one up Sokka, that she is more skilled she's more skilled as a warrior than he is, and of course gets embarrassed. And so when this happens, Sokka leaves, and he's just kind of deflated about it. And then Suki also kind of retreats a little bit more back into her old ways, being more reserved and kind of awkward. And then of course later they meet up again, and Sokka and Suki have this really nice training session, and this is where Sokka admits that he's not really a warrior, that he hasn't done much fighting, and that he still has a lot to learn, a lot of what he talks about in the original series. And you can just feel the chemistry between them even more than all of the original series, and I will die on that hill. I loved every second they were on screen together. Honestly, I might be the only one, but I'm okay with that. So in a later episode, Sokka and Katara travel to the spirit world with Aang, and they are shown truths from their past that they have to overcome. And Katara faces her memory of her mother dying, which we brutally see in this. And it's a recreated scene from season 3, the Raven Raiders. And Sokka relives a memory of when he passed his ice dodging trial back home, but he actually didn't. Balto actually helped him and saved the people who were on the ship from crashing. And the other men of his tribe knew, even though Sokka was given the passing grade, what it was. And again, in this scene, it just shows how incompetent Sokka is with the decisions that he makes. And in the scene, they even point to Balto and his father Hakoda who makes an appearance in this show, how Hakoda is disappointed with Sokka and his actions. And again, this carries into who Sokka is as a character, and eventually would become a great leader and warrior as the show goes on, hopefully. And so, and probably the scariest scene of the show is where both Katara and Sokka are taken by Ko, the face stealer, which was accurately and horrifyingly adapted into live action. That's all I'm gonna say. You just have to watch it. Moving on, I want to talk about Zuko and Iroh and their dynamics. Zuko is not as whiny as he is in the original. He feels definitely more mature in this, and he still has his hot-headed moments, don't get me wrong, but overall I just like this version way better personally, at least for now, until we see what Dallas can bring to the character in future seasons. Paul as Iroh was like, it was ripped straight out of the original. I mentioned before about a scene they share, and I wanted to bring it up here because it's an original scene for this adaptation where we see the funeral of Iroh's son, Luten. And in the scene, Zuko comes up to Iroh and gives him an officer medal that Luten gave to him a while back. And I forgot the exact reason for it, but he gives it back to Iroh, and they just have this moment together that just beautifully illustrates the relationship between Iroh and Zuko. And in this scene, Iroh actually ends the scene with tears coming down his eyes, and honestly, so did I. They also, oh man, the music in this scene, they do an orchestrated composed version of Leaves from the Vine, which is the famous song that is sung in the original series by Iroh on the anniversary of Luten's death. And they just play it in this, and it's just just a masterclass in character development and overall just very an emotional scene. You just have to watch it, and I hope more people talk about this scene because it's truly just great. So there is another scene with Zuko and his crew, and the whole show up until this point, Zuko is kind of dismissive of his crew and doesn't really take them seriously, and kind of like, calls them idiots and morons and stuff like that. So this point, his crew is kind of like against Zuko in a way. But in this scene, we learned that the crew is a division of soldiers that were new and inexperienced, and they were going to be sacrificed in a battle as like cannon fodder, basically. And Zuko spoke up against this plan, and that's what led to the Agni Kai with his father, Ozai, the Fire Lord, and where he got a scar. Now, in the show, this was never explained. They mentioned that they were going to sacrifice some people, but it was never explained that those people, as punishment, would be Zuko's crew. And so when we see the flashback of Ozai giving Zuko this task of finding the Avatar, he's like, since you want to save this crew, these soldiers so much, they're going to be your crew. And so that's how Zuko got his crew. And so once his lieutenant finds out about this, when Zuko returns from his Blue Spirit episode, which I'll talk about a little bit, Zuko returns and they give him the respect and honor that Zuko deserves, and they treat him like a crowned prince, and they give him this respect because without Zuko, they would have died. And I believe that this scene was put in here because it starts the path for Zuko to his redemption arc and finding his honor again. And I really, really like this scene. Let's talk about the villains. So, of course, Admiral Zhao is in this show. He is portrayed by Kin Wing. Sorry if I mispronounced that. I don't know what else I've seen him in, but I thought he played Zhao fine. Zhao in this didn't really feel like much of a threat, at least early on. He starts off as like this lowly commander that Zuko and Iroh don't even know. In the show, it's established that Zuko knows who Zhao is, and in this, Zhao is just some random officer in the south of the world or whatever. And so when he finds out about the Avatar, he's like, "Oh, Zuko, let me help you. You know, we can work together on this." But secretly, he's like feeding information to the Fire Lord. And this is where Azula comes in, and she's kind of like this ally to Zhao, and just literally just to see Zuko fail. Like, if she can get this guy to bring in the Avatar, then Zuko can never return, and then she can be the proud child of the Fire Nation and eventually become the Fire Lady, Fire Lord. Does she still be called Fire Lord? I don't know. And then there's one episode where he just becomes the Admiral at the behest of Azula. Okay. And we don't really spend a lot of time with him, actually. And I think it's because we have a lot of these extra scenes with Azula and Ozai, and I think this is kind of a weak point for me, I'm going to be honest. And because of this change, Azula is now seen as like this person behind everything. Like, and this sets her up as a threat for season 2. And again, this is a spoiler. But because this season ends with her conquering Omashu, and that's when like the series ends, and so that's gonna carry over into the next season, I hope. We also see Mei and Ty Lee in this, but they don't really do anything. They're just kind of there giving praise to Azula like they do in the show. And then Ozai is kind of the same. I mean, besides burning those rebels alive, which is the sickest scene he's in, he doesn't really do anything either, which is fine because he doesn't do anything in the show until like the last 4 episodes of the series. So I don't know. I think overall the villains are probably just the weakest link of the show, except for Zuko and Iroh, really. But again, that's just my opinion. Okay, so let's talk about the avatars and overall the bending. So I think the show does a really good job of showcasing the avatars in their respective arcs of the show. Aang meets Kyoshi first, then he meets Roku, and then Korek, who gets a lot of screen time in this. Now, I think Kyoshi was adapted the best when it came to like her attitude and her overall look. And the way that she like carried herself while talking to Aang, I thought was really well done. And it did this really cool thing where Kyoshi possessed Aang and fought off the firebenders from her island in that episode. And now we've seen this before in season 2, in Avatar Day, where she possessed Aang to kind of clear her name about what happened to that general. I forgot what his name is, but we never like see her fight. And in this, we see her this just sick fight scene where she uses all 4 elements to fight off Zhao and the rest of the firebenders. Now, Roku. I don't know what happened, but Roku was the weakest out of all of these. And I'm sure I won't be the only one that says this, but I was really let down with the portrayal of Roku. And it's nothing against the actor. I think he did fine. It's just he's only in one scene, and it's where Aang goes to his temple, but it's like a 5-minute scene. Like, there's not a whole soul, like, you have to meet me by the solstice time or whatever. He just goes there, gets information about Ko, and goes back and saves Katara and Aang. It's part of that episode. So it's like a 5-minute scene. And it, I'm just so lost about like where the translation got lost. And it's like he's in one scene, and instead of being like this stoic, like wise avatar that he's portrayed in the show, they portray him like a silly knockoff. And for real, I thought I was watching like a porn parody. Like it didn't make any sense to me. I mean, it's sad. But Korek was cool. We got a little more backstory with him. That's awesome. And I mean, he looked great in his costume, I thought. And that's really all I have to say about that. So the bending for and other visual effects, for the most part, I thought were pretty good. A lot of the bending fight scenes I thought were pretty well choreographed. At first, I thought the water bending looked the worst out of all four elements. But by the time the finale came, it was a lot better, especially with the fight, and especially with Paku and Katara's fight scene. It was really showcased, I thought, really well. And firebending was definitely the most used, and second to that was airbending. So there you go. There was a lot of scenes where the backgrounds were clearly green screened, which is weird because there were scenes that were clearly on a practical set. Like, they look like they're standing in the woods, and then they would cut to another shot and it's clearly green screened. And my thinking is that it's probably was post, maybe reshoots or something, but it was really odd. It's pretty jarring, really, if you have an eye for that kind of thing. So there is a lot I want to talk about, but I don't want to make this video any longer than it needs to be. However, we still need to talk about the finale, which ends with the Siege of the North. Now, for the most part, it's the same as the show. They arrive, Sokka meets Yue, Katara is forbidden to fight, the Fire Nation invades, Shao kills the Moon Spirit, Yue has to give her life back to the Moon Spirit, Sokka is big sad, and then Aang destroys the Fire Nation Navy. That's pretty much it. However, there are some interesting changes that I would like to highlight. And the biggest one, I think, is that Yue is more of a character in this than she is in the original series. And that's something I really appreciate. She also isn't engaged to Han, which was a plot point in that show. And Sokka actually meets Han in this. And Han actually tells him this, that Yue called off the wedding, that they were supposed to be betrothed and that it was arranged when they were like children, and that she called it off and they respected her decision, which, cool. Speaking of Han, he is also more of a character in this and not some throwaway character that Sokka fights over, Another thing about Yue is that she's more spiritual in this show, and she can actually travel to the spirit world, which, that's cool. In her dreams, no less, which was actually foreshadowed in the Spirited Away episode. But I will say this, the ending fight scene is epic. Like, you can definitely tell that a lot of the budget went to like the last episode specifically. And another change that I like to mention is that Zuko gets one last confrontation with Zhao at the North Pole, and Iroh actually finishes him off instead of the Ocean Spirit. Speaking of which, the Ocean Spirit, the Koi Spirit that Aang uses to destroy the Fire Nation Navy, they actually gave a really interesting explanation that when Aang, they harken back a lot that the Avatar has to make sacrifices and like the hardest choices imaginable. And so in this moment, instead of just Aang going to the Avatar state, he basically gives his body up as a vessel to the Ocean Spirit, and that's what creates the giant koi fish monster. And I thought this was a real, and they were like, Aang is gone, because at this point the Moon Spirit was dead, and they did the black and white thing, and the only light was the fire, which is cool. But they preface that Aang is gone, like his body, like he is no more. His body is possessed by the Ocean Spirit, and then of course when Yue gives her life back to the Moon Spirit, Aang is then returned to us. But all is good in the end, and we see that a lot of people die. Like, we see dead bodies. We see them honoring the dead and like soldiers of the Water Nation. And honestly, it included some characters that I didn't expect to cry over. Yet there I was. I know that I skipped over a lot of different things. There was one throwaway line that talked about some pirates, a canyon guide, and a volcano, which are references, of course, to the worst episodes of the show. Again, my opinion. Also, from the beginning, Katara had the waterbending scroll that was passed down through her family, and Aang already had his bison whistle, which we found out in the Omashu arc that Boomy made. And I didn't really talk about Boomy. Thought he was fine. No notes. But I still think the Omashu arcs are the best in the season. And again, I will die on that hill. I think there are still a lot of cool surprises in the show that I think you should just experience yourself. So with that being said, I think that about covers it for this review of Avatar: The Last Airbender. And honestly, I'm looking forward to season 2 when it comes out in 2028 or whatever. But have you watched the show? Did you see the original? And do you agree or disagree with any of my viewpoints? Let me know below. Well guys, that'll be it for this video. Let me know what you thought about the show below, and if you want to see more content like this, or maybe even a reaction to the show. I don't know. Let's see what I can do. But don't forget to like and subscribe. I just want to build this channel back out, and it would really appreciate me if you guys can do that. But anyways, guys, like I said, my name is Jorvik. See you next time.